Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey into the spiritual and intellectual legacy of a really pivotal 19th century religious figure.
That's right. We're talking about Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who lived from 1835 to 1908.
And he's revered by members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community as the promised Messiah and Mahdi.
Mm-hmm.
We've synthesized a whole collection of sources that detail his mission, and it's fascinating because it wasn't just about reforming a faith, it was, in a way, about fundamentally reinterpreting how that faith should engage with the modern world.
The mission statement he laid out was incredibly ambitious, especially for that time.
What were the key points?
His stated goal was really threefold. First, to, and this is a quote, reinstate the absolute oneness of God. So pushing back against what he saw as corrupted practices.
Okay.
Second, to promote a revival of Islam, but through moral and ethical reformation. And finally, to spread Islam globally in what he called its pristine form.
Before we jump right into the details of the mission itself, I think we really need to set the scene. He didn't just emerge in a vacuum, did he?
Not at all. The sources all stress that the era he was operating in was one of intense religious and intellectual upheaval.
So what did that environment actually look like? We're talking about the Indian subcontinent at that time.
It was a crisis point, really. This is the late 19th century, deep in the colonial period, and Islam was under immense pressure.
From the outside.
Yes, but also from within. Our sources indicate that many Muslims were actually becoming disillusioned, some even abandoning their faith entirely.
Wow. Why was that?
A lot of it was due to intense missionary activity from other religions, particularly Christianity. There was a feeling of being on the defensive.
So a widespread skepticism and maybe even a sense of retreat within the Muslim community itself.
Exactly. And that is the crucial context for where Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's work begins. His successors describe him as standing like a soldier for the defense of Islam against all attacks.
But, and this is the key point, this wasn't a military defense.
No, not at all. It was a deeply intellectual and spiritual one.
That distinction, a soldier without a sword, that feels like the core insight here. His entire defense was built on reasoned argument, on compelling logic.
And inspiring a universal love for God and humanity. It was a complete paradigm shift.
Right, and that's the aha moment for anyone learning about him. Realizing the mission was rooted in turning skepticism back on itself through intellectual engagement.
While, at the same time, demanding this radical moral cleansing within the community.
To really understand that, we need to trace his own path. So let's get into section 1, his early life. There's a wonderful biographical detail. His childhood nickname was Mazitar.
Yes, Mazitar. It literally means one who spends most of his time in the mosque.
That really says it all, doesn't it?
It does. This wasn't just a passive spirituality. The sources describe intense early devotion, meditation, seclusion. It all set the foundation for what came later.
And these spiritual exertions, they culminated in him reporting divine revelations, visions.
Right. And those experiences convinced him he was chosen for a special purpose.
Was there a specific moment, a turning point, that formalized this conviction for him?
Well, our sources point to a vision he reportedly had in 1864 of the Prophet Muhammad. He took that as a confirmation that he was chosen to lead this reform.
So that deep personal spirituality was the fuel for the intellectual engine he was about to start.
A perfect way to put it.
But he didn't found the community right away, did he? He spent years building his intellectual credibility first. Let's talk about his first major scholarly work.
Absolutely. Even before officially launching the movement, he published Barayan-e-Ahmadiyya, which translates to the Proofs of Ahmad.
And this came out in parts, right?
In installments, yeah, between 1880 and 1884. And this was not some quiet devotional work. It was a powerful apologetic text.
What made it so significant?
It was a direct response to all the criticisms and doubts of the era. It used logic and evidence to argue for the enduring truth and spiritual vitality of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad.
So it established his reputation.
Almost overnight. It positioned him as a formidable defender of Islam, a unique voice, a spiritualist who could also wield philosophical logic.
And that intellectual reputation is what allowed him to then transition into forming a community. He made the formal move in 1889. How did that happen?
That was a pivotal moment, based on another revelation he reported. He publicly invited truth seekers to pledge allegiance to him. The act is called Bayat.
For our listeners who might not be familiar, what exactly is Bayat in this context?
It's a formal covenant, an oath of initiation. but it was a spiritual contract.
Not a political one.
Not at all. It was an agreement to adhere to 10 specific conditions, guiding them toward true faith, true purity, and the love of God. That single public invitation officially marks the founding of the Ahmadiyya community.
That's a huge shift, moving from solitary scholar to mobilizing a whole community.
And that community would draw from the incredible body of work he created. I mean, he authored over 80 books on religion and philosophy in his lifetime.
Over 80 books. That's a staggering output.
It really is. And those writings lead us directly into Section 2, which covers, the heart of his intellectual revival, the harmony of faith and reason.
And this is where it gets really interesting for anyone studying how religious thought meets modernity. The core intellectual hallmark of his teaching was that faith and reason were absolutely compatible.
Precisely. Unlike some religious responses at the time that sort of retreated into pure tradition or mysticism, he insisted that Islam be defended using evidence and logic.
So he went out and argued his case.
Oh, yes. He actively sought out public debates, dialogues. He engaged with Christian missionaries, Hindu scholars, even traditional Muslim clerics who criticized his views.
So this wasn't just quiet contemplation. It was, in a way, the intellectual battleground of the age. He insisted on rational discourse over blind imitation.
Correct. And the nature of his works reflects this. Many were polemical and apologetic, focused intently on establishing the truth of Islamic principles through rational argument. He didn't just ask people to believe, he asked them to examine the proofs.
But the real challenge in the late 19th century was the rise of scientific skepticism. How did he navigate that perceived conflict between religious revelation and scientific discovery?
This is such a key insight. He argued forcefully that religion and science are entirely compatible because, in his view, they both come from the same divine source.
Okay, so how did he demonstrate that?
He would cite Quranic verses that spoke about natural phenomena and link them to contemporary scientific ideas. His point was that God's revealed word, the Quran, could never contradict God's physical laws, which are nature and science.
So what was the practical implication of that? Did it directly counter the kind of skepticism fostered by the European Enlightenment?
Absolutely it did. By framing religion not as some separate superstitious realm, but as a system of truth that builds upon and explains the natural world, he neutralized that argument that religious belief was inherently irrational.
He was basically presenting Islam as the most rational of faiths.
Capable of synthesizing ancient wisdom with modern discovery, yes.
That really grounds faith in a powerful, demonstrable framework. Okay, so if the intellectual defense was about shaping the mind of the movement, let's turn to its heart and its action. The principles of peace, prayer, and universal compassion.
This brings us to Section 3, and a really crucial distinction of his mission: the total rejection of violent force in matters of faith. He rejected violent jihad as a means of religious propagation.
Given the intense political and colonial environment of the time, how radical was that theological shift?
It was revolutionary and quite controversial. At a time when some religious leaders were calling for military resistance or holy war, he taught that Islam must prevail by its own spiritual and moral merit, not through coercion.
So he was arguing against military jihad in that age.
Emphatically. He argued that the circumstances of the present age made it impermissible.
He was essentially reprioritizing the whole concept of jihad, emphasizing the greater jihad, the internal struggle over the physical one.
Precisely. He saw the current era as the age of the pen, not the sword, an age of intellectual and spiritual struggle. He shifted the focus entirely to peaceful outreach.
In that paradigm, with force off the table, what becomes the primary vehicle for spiritual growth? The sources really stress prayer, or dua.
He saw earnest prayer not just as a ritual, but as the direct dynamic link to God. He asserted that heartfelt supplication was the engine that could invoke immediate divine guidance and mercy.
There's a powerful personal quote from him on this in our sources.
Yes. He said, "I say truly that if crying before God Almighty is full of utmost humility, it moves His grace and mercy." For him, this wasn't passive. It was an active, transformative encounter.
So prayer becomes a spiritual tool. How did it benefit the worshiper beyond just gaining mercy?
Well, the sources explain that this level of prayer strengthens faith, awakens a sense of certainty, and helps the individual gain patience and inner peace.
Especially amid all those external pressures.
Exactly. It was a vehicle for transforming uncertainty into steadfastness, allowing believers to have, and this is a quote, firm faith in that which is yet to come.
And this intense personal transformation through prayer was then directly linked to an external ethical code, right? Spiritual purity was inseparable from service to humanity.
That is the cornerstone his mission. Universal love and mercy for all humanity was, for him, mandatory. He constantly emphasized that justice and compassion are inseparable from true faith.
He brought back these core Quranic injunctions.
To care for orphans, the needy, the neighbor, even strangers.
Yeah, and he made it clear that ritual worship without social consciousness was, well, worthless.
Did. He taught that if one neglects their fellow humans, one's worship is of no value in the sight of God. It's a powerful ethical mandate that forces you to look outward.
He insisted that a true Muslim must desire for others what he desires for himself.
A beautiful teaching of universal empathy that really transcends religious boundaries.
And that profound ethical requirement is basically crystallized in the movement's most famous motto, isn't it?
It is. It captures the entire ethical code succinctly. Love for all, hatred for none.
And to make sure the community actually embodied this, he codified those 10 ethical conditions we mentioned earlier, things like honesty, forgiveness, neighborly kindness.
Ensuring the community was a force for real, palpable social reform wherever it took root.
It's such a powerful ethical structure. So let's shift our focus to Section 4, his legacy and global influence. By the time he passed away in 1908, the movement had clearly gained some serious traction.
It had. By 1908, despite all the opposition he faced, his followers numbered around 400,000. But the real story is what happened after his death. That focus on peaceful propagation allowed the community to expand dramatically.
How far has that message spread today?
The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is now active in over 200 countries and territories. They're continuing the mission, focusing on building mosques, hospitals, schools, translating the Quran.
Conveying what they call the true and peaceful message of Islam. And his prolific output, those 80-plus books, they remain widely studied, which really proves the enduring scholarly relevance of his arguments.
Absolutely. His landmark treatises are essential reading for anyone studying Islam's encounter with modernity. Works like Philosophy of Islam from 1896 and Jesus in India from 1899, they're still cited by scholars all the time.
The essence of his call, then, was this dynamic blend, reaffirming Islamic faith through reasoned belief, heartfelt prayer, and universal compassion.
It was a truly holistic vision. His belief was that the essence of religion is love for God expressed in love and justice toward mankind. He sought to mobilize a community that was morally strong and peacefully engaged with the world.
That's a perfect synthesis to bring us to the end of our deep dive. We've seen how his mission was this remarkable combination of deep, almost monastic spiritual experience.
You see that in his nickname, Ixitar.
Exactly. Paired with this relentless, sharp intellectual engagement visible in his extensive writing and his public debates.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, his legacy shows how profound spiritual revival was linked directly to practical social ethics and intellectual defense. The goal was always achieving true purity and the love of God, paired with humble, compassionate service to everyone, regardless of their background.
And as a final provocative thought for you, the listener, the current Ahmadi leader has stated a resolution to combat wrongfully held suspicions with nothing except love and a total commitment to serve mankind.
This raises a really important question drawn right from the core of the mission. Consider the challenge of universal empathy desiring for others, even those who oppose you, what you desire for yourself. What would the application of that single, unwavering ethical principle actually look like in your own life, or navigating today's often complex and polarized global society? Think about that commitment to love and service as you move forward.